All right, let's do this.
We're here.
We're in the studio.
We're somewhere.
All right, so this is Terrifying Enlightenment. I'm Mark Molumby, and we have Christo here across from me.
Hello.
Hey. My idea, Christo, is to let you introduce yourself, say a little bit about your background. Then I'll do a little bit myself. Then I'll play a little audio clip from an audiobook I listened to a couple of weeks ago, and then we'll just start talking, mate. So
start flowing.
Tell me about yourself.
So basically, I'm just a human that dedicates himself to personal development, and in the quest for personal development, I try to inspire other people to personally develop themselves also. So that goes, through physically developing yourself, through exercising, but also mentally developing yourself. And I think both of them coincide with each other. So yeah, I have a YouTube channel in which I make videos that hopefully inspire people and provoke thought, go into like different philosophies, and also do body experiments and this, that, and the other.
Body
experiments, like,
What happens if I stab myself here?
Yeah, what happens if I stab myself in the eye? Do I go blind? Is it really true? Or have they been lying to me the whole time? No, we won't go that far, but, something like fasting. Yeah. I've tested out fasting, and fasting's actually been very good for me, both mentally and physically. Mm-hmm. So things like that, and sometimes things work and you figure out that they're actually good for you, and sometimes things don't work and you figure out that they're a load of crap. So that's the whole thing, just to leave a body of work behind for people to learn from. And I like to write as well, like yourself. Hopefully on this podcast we can really kind of go down the route of exploring some really kooky, mad stuff that actually has a purpose for people to listen into and learn from.
Excellent. I met Christo at Psychedelic Society of Ireland night in Dublin there a few weeks ago, which was talking about magic mushrooms or psilocybin mushrooms, and the fight to have them either decriminalised or made legal in Ireland and worldwide. And when Christo spoke up, I straight away saw a kindred spirit and somebody that basically sees the world the same way as myself. And I think the both of us, when we heard each other speak, thought that it would be a great idea if we combined our powers and see where it went.
Mighty Morphing Power Rangers.
So I'll talk a little bit about myself for a moment, or this is the whole show will be constantly referring to what is ego and what is not ego. So all this story I'm about to tell you is a complete lie in the ultimate sense of the world, but in a societal sense it's going to make a lot of sense. Well, I grew up a country boy, I wouldn't say very religious family, but a family that believed, so to speak, and through my growing up, through my teenage years and my early university years, I found that I was also a believer without questioning things too much. And then as it does in modern Ireland, I started to lean more towards atheism and shedding some of the dogmas of what seemed to be nonsensical stories that we're told by religion or society in general. And I moved to Australia. I became a personal trainer, and I had a 10-year period living in Australia, and then my life kind of fell apart. I got divorced, I moved back to Ireland, then I moved back to Australia again, and it led me to taking a substance called ayahuasca, which is a extremely powerful hallucinogenic. It's the first time I had really ventured into any sort of psychedelic substance or legal substance in general. I was I wouldn't say teetotaler, but I definitely hadn't been taking any sort of drugs or abusing substances in general up to that point. But that experience completely blew me out of the water. It completely changed all of my beliefs and completely changed my viewpoint in life in general. When I say it completely changed all my beliefs, it actually got rid of all my beliefs, is a better way of putting it. I didn't believe in anything after that. I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. It was actually a really disturbing experience as well as a very necessary one.
Dissolving.
Yeah. And then I came back to Ireland, decided that I needed to figure myself out. Why did I have a self-destructive pattern? What did that experience mean? What is real? What is this world we're in? We're on a big blue ball floating through infinity, and no one knows what's going on. We kind of put our head in the sands. A few people have their philosophical ideas, But day to day, we kind of just focus on our small world, stick to our lane, and power on through. And I don't do that.
Just get on with it.
I don't think you do either, Christo.
No.
So, yeah, I've been studying Eastern philosophy. I've been studying mysticism. I've been studying every type of information I can to figure out what's going on. And obviously, I haven't a clue. But I have, at least I know I haven't a clue. And I think Socrates says, I think he said something along the lines of, the reason I'm more intelligent than you is because I know that I don't know. Something like that. That was a very bad quote. So I'll do what I said I was going to do, Christo. I'm going to play this little clip and then we'll have a good chat about it, okay?
Cool.
So the show is called Terrifying Enlightenment because when you're chasing enlightenment or awakening or nirvana or these Eastern ideas that a lot of people in Western culture aren't too familiar with, people don't realize that there is a scary side to this, and there is a part of it that when you get to certain experiences or levels of the path towards truth, that you get quite terrified, and it can be quite hard to process, and people generally don't speak about that. So I'm going to put that on now.
Cool.
All right.
Say you have a dream in the middle of the night, and you wake up from it, and as soon as you wake up from your dream that you're having, you suddenly realize at that moment, oh, it was a dream. The moment before you woke up, the dream to you was entirely real. It was as real as this moment. But then you awaken, you open your eyes, and you realize, oh, it was just a dream. So in a certain sense, you wake up from the reality of the dream space to the reality of your everyday life, we could say, mindset. In the same way, spiritual awakening is where we awaken from what we think of as the normal state of consciousness. You know, you're awake, your eyes are open, you're moving about. To awaken from that to one's deep, essential, true nature. And it feels like, literally like when you wake up from a dream. So it's almost like you wake up from the dream of thinking that you are already awake. That your waking state was actually awake. When we spiritually awaken, we realize that what we thought was an awake state, meaning when we're walking around through our lives, we thought that was an awake state until we have a spiritual awakening. And then that state, now that we just woke up from, seems like a dream. It's like going from one order of being or one order of reality to another. So, in a certain sense, this is a shifting of the center of our regard to us as an individual, as a person, as a separate, isolated someone, to what we all share in common, that which unifies us all. That's what spiritual awakening. It's a shift from your regard, from seeing yourself as a limited, isolated, separate person, to realizing you are essentially that which all beings partake of, which all beings essentially and truly are. That's as close as I could come to describing what spiritual awakening actually is. And so it's literally to wake up from one order of reality to another, a completely different order of reality. Now that deeper sense of reality is now available to you, and your sense of who you are, your sense of yourself, your identity is shifted, it's changed, it's undergone a transformation or a mutation. And that's spiritual awakening. And most of the good esoteric inner spiritual disciplines are means of bringing about that awakening or opening one to awakening. As we'll see in the story of Jesus, it's talked about when John the Baptist baptizes Jesus in the river of Jordan, and as Jesus is coming up from the water, the Spirit in the form of a dove descends from heaven into him. And that's how it's depicted at the very beginning of at least the Gospel of Mark, is when, with his own awakening, when Spirit descends into him. And it's recorded beautifully as the veil of heaven is torn apart. Something's torn apart and spirit descends. It's like when you awaken, the veil of your dream state is torn apart, and all of a sudden you pop out of it and you're awakened. And the words that are used to describe that in the story of the Spirit descending into Jesus right after he's baptized by John really corresponds with one of my experiences, because as I often say to people, that awakening is really a transcendent experience. You awaken up and out of your identity with body and mind. So that's a type of awakening. Now, in my case, when I had that experience, which was a very powerful, powerful experience of up and out, and when spirit or consciousness moved up and out, literally, of the body and the mind, there was, for a period of time, absolutely no experience of anything. The body was gone, mind was gone, no perception of the world, where I was, my surroundings, nothing. It was as if I moved into a total void. And from that state of voidness, after a while, what started to happen was this download. It literally felt like then there was download of insight. And there were literally hundreds of insights per second being downloaded into my system. Many more than I could actually keep up with. But it was literally like when you download a program into your computer, it was as if this spirit, divine being, as I like to call it, was just being downloaded, hundreds and hundreds of insights a second. And it was just as depicted in this story of the descent of spirit into Jesus. As I said, that I read the Jesus story as a metaphor for spiritual awakening. And if you have experienced the descent of spirit, when you read that as part of the story, you know exactly what they're talking about. You don't need anybody to confirm it. You don't need anybody to tell you what it all means. You know that story tells about the descent of spirit in about as clear a way as could possibly be told. That the myth, the story, has conveyed, or at least mirrored, the actual experience. And so that's awakening. And people can have greater or lesser, there's many different sort of degrees within awakening, but all awakening has as its common denominator a shift from seeing ourselves as a separate, isolated human being to that which we all share. By whatever word you want to give that. It could be spirit, as I often use, divine being. It could be consciousness. Many words can be used, but it's the experience that's important. What will then ensue at a certain point, sometimes very rapidly, sometimes not for quite a while, is a phase that I call trials and tribulations. And this is symbolized by Jesus' 40 days in the desert and his encounter with Satan in the desert. This is also mythically portrayed, Jesus under the Bodhi tree, as he's sitting under the tree, and the forces of Maya, which Maya means the forces of illusion. Maya is sort of an impersonal force of illusion. Whereas Jesus meeting the Satan in the desert, Satan is a personification of what was often thought of as evil, but the source of evil is actually illusion. So there's these two different references for the same event. There's the Jesus in the desert with his temptations and trials with Satan, and when it happened to Buddha, it happened under a tree, a Bodhi tree, which is symbolic for the tree of life. You'll find the tree of life right at the beginning of the Bible in Genesis, but the Buddha sitting under the tree of life and being assaulted by Maya, by the forces of illusion. These are two mythic ways of depicting a very discernible and experienceable reality.
All right, there's a lot to unpack in there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Christo?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, let's first of all, just in case anyone listened to that and got the idea and got lost and probably thought we're getting quite dogmatic or religious here. Let's just be clear, we're both atheists here. But
I'm a Gnostic, by the way, not
well,
agnostic.
yeah, okay. Agnostic, probably. Oh, Gnostic. Okay.
Gnostic.
A Gnostic atheist. Okay. I would say I'm the same. So, yeah, I think if one listens to what he's really saying and what he actually means, a lot of what we hear in these religious texts shouldn't be taken literally. I mean, it's not necessarily history, and even if it is, I don't think it benefits us to take it that way. But if we take it metaphorically as a way to personally develop really and benefit ourselves and grow and realize that we're not just the separated individuals living their own lives and trying to compete against each other, but essentially we're part of something greater than that, a singularity that cooperates with each other, a symbiosis, if you will. And that's essentially what a spiritual awakening is what he's saying, is that the realization that we're part of a symbiosis, and to work together and to be aware of that.
That excerpt was from a book called Resurrecting Jesus by Adyashanti, and the subtitle is Embodying the Spirit of a Revolutionary Mystic. So it's viewing the Jesus story as if he was going through a mystical awakening, and framing that as something that we can all experience, and that it's not that he was the Son of God, it's that we are all sons of God and daughters of God, and that we can all awaken to this experience. So we've got to define some terms now, because we're going to be talking about things that some people may not have ever come across. So we have to talk about things like, what is ego? What is ultimate reality? What are dimensions? Because we're going to be talking about dimensions as well.
And all of this can be interpreted in so many different ways.
Yeah,
so it's difficult. But
so I'll give you my opinion of how I see the world, because we have multiple levels of how we talk to each other. So on one level, I'm Mark, you're Christo. I see you across from me. I don't feel like you are me. I feel like this table here in front of me isn't me. So I've separated myself from the external world. And then that's a way we can interact with each other. I can talk about something like this microphone in front of me, and you have a concept in your head. If you close your eyes and I say the word microphone, you can still visualize what I'm speaking of. And these are very necessary and practical ways of seeing the world. But there's a deeper or higher way of realizing the world, that when we get too engrossed in this normal societal way and relation way of seeing the world, that we kind of miss. And that is that we all started from a big bang, which seems to have sprung out of nowhere. Now, a lot of people will maybe say that they don't agree with the Big Bang Theory, but if you do subscribe to that we came from a single point, and then gases condensed under great heat and became stars, and then stars died and exploded in supernova, which condensed to make more planets and stars. Then those planets were devoid of life. They were just rocky volcanic balls of flame, and then over time that cooled, and then plants grew, and then we grew out of that. So that just shows that there's a constant flux. Everything is constantly changing. So this microphone in front of me is a microphone at the moment. Everything that makes this microphone was once part of a star. Everything that I am was once part of a star. Everything that you are was once part of a star.
Even when you die.
Even when I die, everything I'm made of will continue on. Before I was born, everything was here. When I drank a bit of water earlier on today, that's now become what I would consider me. The food I ate today is now me. But when it wasn't in my mouth and in my system, it wasn't me. It was a sandwich. So we have these separations that we make in the world. And language is the biggest barrier to spiritual awakening, because language is inherently dualistic. So in order to have a conversation where I say the word microphone, and if you have your eyes closed you can imagine a microphone, you have to have an idea as a microphone as separate to everything that isn't a microphone.
Indeed.
And while that is practically useful, if we label something as a microphone, then we can lose the deeper reality that it is only a microphone in its current state. And that in an infinite timeline, it is not a microphone. It is part of the oneness that is all of us, and the non-dual reality of life, where we're all the one thing. So my opinion of what ego is ego is that when we forget and we confuse our thoughts, which separate, because saying I and you is creating that separation, but it's practical. But forgetting that that's just practical, and the deeper picture is that you are me and I am you. Forgetting that is ego.
Yeah.
And that's how I see
Maya.
it. No, Maya is illusion. That the illusion that this reality that we see around us is the only way things are. That what I believe is fact, and what I don't believe is kind of pushed to the side. It's not really how things are, because if you're separating everything, say I say this, that's up, this is down, that's north and that's west, that's only relative to points that are also imaginary. So if you're in space, there's no up or down or left or right. So it's only relative to where you are at the time, and everything is relative. So there's no real truth. How would you describe ego, Christo?
I mean, you've basically just described ego how I would describe it, essentially. But yeah, I think ego is just the great Maya, the great illusion that we sometimes get too enthralled in and lost in. I think it's important, it is practical, like you said, especially in this society. We do need our ego to, in some sense, to accomplish things and to have your own, let's say, individual experience per se. But like you say, we can't forget that there is something greater than that. There's something bigger outside of the ego, and it's once you forget that there is that, that's when you're lost in the ego, and there needs to be some way in which you can dissolve that ego. Do you know a way that we can do that?
I do know a way. I know several ways. So the most common way is meditation. So meditation, or mindfulness as it's now packaged, because meditation is even too religious for this current world. Society has gone through a massive
shift, almost.
Well, over the last 100, 200 years, we've just got rid of spirituality. We do not want God. We do not want religion. We do not want these ideas that are outdated, that are almost like, as Alan Watts puts it, it's almost like having someone staring over your shoulder all the time while you're doing your homework. It bugs you, and it's almost like God was bugging us for a long time, this idea of this omnipresent being always looking over your shoulder. You're like, piss off, God. I've had enough for you.
Yeah. People started reading Nietzsche and they realized, oh, God is dead.
Absolutely. But Nietzsche was actually trying to tell us that we killed our idea of God, but we lost the deeper picture that was being pointed towards.
Yeah, the singularity within us all.
Yeah, he destroyed Descartes' I think therefore I am, which is what Western philosophy is built on. He said there's so many daring assertions in the two words I think, that there's the I that generates the thought, that the thoughts that are generated are belonging to the person who says I, that thought is a separate thing that is generated by the I, that, and so on and so on. So there's so many assumptions in our language that we block reality every time we speak or think. And that's why I said, when you said I was an atheist, or that we're both atheists, I've come across this term recently. Everyone's heard of agnostic.
Yeah. So, I get what you're saying there. We could be labelled further, because obviously the world is full of labels. So as soon as we say atheist, people might assume that we don't believe in any unified force or anything mystical. But I think we could say we're mystic atheists, or we're Gnostic atheists, as you say, that we do believe in this energy that binds us all. So all these labels, all these definitions, they just, you have to sometimes define a definition.
Exactly.
And then you have to define that definition too. And you just get lost. So we're just part of something beautiful.
Yes.
That's
terrifying.
And terrifying. And it's okay to be scared.
Yes, absolutely.
It's actually good, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is good to be scared, because then you realize that there's more lessons to be learned always, I think. And I think you have to face your fears and be honest about your fears and let go of your fears. I think acceptance of where you are in your life, rather than clinging to ideologies or ways of doing things and seeing things, is a big part of the conflict that we see in the world. No one wants to acknowledge their shadow, as Jordan Peterson and Carl Jung would talk about, which we'll talk about now. That this idea that the other, or the people on the outside, are the people that are bad, and that we are the good ones. And so because they are the bad ones, then anything I do to that bad person is justified.
Justified, yeah.
And this is a pattern we see repeated in society over and over with Hitler and the Jews.
Yeah, and it creates needless segregation that we don't need. It doesn't coincide with, you know, what I was saying before with the symbiosis of the planet, because essentially, even if we look to the soil, for example, we look to plants and mycelium. And for anyone that doesn't know what mycelium is basically this network that binds all of fungi and mushrooms, essentially the same as the roots of like a tree, for example. And this mycelium tends to communicate between itself but also with the roots of the plants, and there is this symbiotic relationship whereby mushrooms will breathe in oxygen, they give out carbon dioxide, the plants exchange by breathing in the carbon dioxide and giving out oxygen, and there's a water exchange and everything. And so I think if we look to nature itself, right, and we see that symbiotic flow, if only we were conscious enough to implement that symbiosis within society, imagine where it could take us. And if you look at when we don't coincide with that law of nature, let's say, it brings us to things like the Holocaust, things like Hitler, things like racism, you know? So essentially, by not coinciding with that law of nature, we're causing havoc in the planet and within society. So look to nature, guys. I mean, you can learn a lot from the trees, you can learn a lot from the mushrooms. I certainly have learned a lot from the mushrooms.
Yes, we have to put in a disclaimer in here, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the disclaimer is that we're not encouraging anybody to do anything illegal. We're just speaking about our own experiences and what we have personally been through. And there's a lot of risks when it comes to different substances that people would talk about. But we're just going to be honest about the experiences we've been through and what we've seen and experienced and done. And everybody listening, just be aware that we're not condoning anything that would get you in trouble, especially when it comes to psychedelics. If you jump in unprepared, you can come out pretty disturbed.
Do your research first, do your due diligence before you go anywhere near it. You need to understand where you're going and what you're getting into. It's not some sort of enjoyable experience. It's not. I mean, it can be. It's
an odd one, isn't it?
It's a challenge.
Someone can come out and be like, that was so hard and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Or it was like, that was so devastating and it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Like, I mean, I've had experiences whereby, and I'm just going to be totally open and transparent here, but I've had experiences where I have thought, or I have felt within the psychedelic experience, that I was going crazy, that I was going insane, that I thought I wasn't going to come back. It's almost like a simulation of death, because you feel like you're stuck and you're gone, like you're not yourself anymore. But then you come back, and then you analyze, and then you think about what was the message there. And if you are an analytical person or a philosophical person, I mean, you do have a bit of an advantage, because you will think about it and you will think, oh well, maybe there was a message there, not necessarily by the mushroom. It could have been by the mushroom, but also by yourself, something inside you that's telling you, you know, to refer to myself, Christo, man, your ego's too big, dude. You want too much money, dude. You're insecure, dude. Like, you let it go. Let it go, man. And then you realize those things, and then you meditate on it, and then you learn to let go. You learn to sort of get into that mindset of or we could call it the God mindset, or the unified force of just outside of the ego, outside of the individualism. And then you go back into the experience and you have a nice experience this time. And it's like, okay. And that's a sign. That's like, oh yeah, okay, they're telling you now, well done.
Yeah,
you did it.
You're on to the next level.
You're on to the next level. Now let's see where we can go from here.
Yeah, I have an interesting theory about it all. So when I've taken magic mushrooms, for example, I've had this experience where I feel like I'm dying, as you said, and that's the ego death. So you're literally going through what feels like a death. Which is terrifying to most people, and it is quite scary when you're going through it. And this is why they say surrender is one of the most important things when it comes to psychedelics. You have to kind of surrender your life. You knew before you did this that you were going to be fine, that it was non-toxic, that physical health wise you were going to be fine, and someone had warned you, just give in to the experience. So you come into this experience, it's getting difficult. A little voice in your head goes, okay, just try and relax, just try and relax. But everything you believe, everything you've ever clung on to, that you're a human, that your name is this, that you've grown up here, that Ireland is this, and so on and so on and so on, all of that is being taken away from you to the point where you've nothing to hold on to. Your sense of your body is even gone. You've blended into the ground underneath you. And so you're existing in this space free from concepts. All your ideas are gone. That stream of consciousness that's constantly running, that's going, oh, it's a lovely day out today, isn't it? I wonder, oh, look at that tree. I wonder if there's any squirrels in that tree. Squirrels are funny creatures, aren't they? Their tail bounces down, and your mind just goes and goes and goes.
Yeah.
And that's stopped. And you're sitting there or lying there, and you don't feel like you have a body, and your mind is quiet, and yet you still exist. You exist in this conscious state. And as you said, then your ego comes back. But what's actually going on is that the mushrooms are putting you into a state that people that have been meditating for 10 years achieve.
Yeah, after the years of practicing.
Years of practice. So they're forcing you into it.
Yeah, it's a shortcut.
It's a shortcut.
Yeah.
So you're getting into that space. But then when you're in that space, when your ego comes back, what you're going to want to do is you're going to analyze it. And what you're going to try and do is analyze an experience that was free from thought with thought.
Mm-hmm.
And that free from thought experience is non-dualistic. You're not creating separation. You're lying there experiencing without thought.
You're just present.
And then you come back in, and you, as Yushanti said in that thing, you're getting so many insights. And it's so profound, and you've never felt anything like this before, and your whole worldview has been completely shattered positively. And yet all you want to do is go, oh my God, I need to figure this out. I need to hold on to this. I need to be able to explain this to someone. This is the most profound thing I've ever been through. Everybody needs to know this. And then you realize that you can't. You can't hold on to anything.
Yeah.
You can't get hold of it. You can't explain it, and you're going to sound like a crazy person.
Yeah.
And if you go into psychology, which is what I'm studying, you're going to into a lecture, and he's going to say anybody who takes these substances experiences delusions and hallucinations. And then they define that as seeing something subjectively, you experience it, but nobody else objectively can experience it, so therefore it doesn't exist. And you're in this state where you've really have touched something universal, and yet you've returned to the state of confusion.
Yeah.
And so for some people, I think both of us are included in this, it's something you can't just put behind you and go, oh yeah, that was a fun trip.
Yeah.
It's something that you're like, no, this was the biggest truth I've ever felt in my life, and the most important message going forward in my life. And I need to figure out how to get there. Again, without mushrooms or without.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important not to rely on anything external, and to realize that you have it already internally. You don't necessarily need the mushrooms, as you said with the guys, let's say the Buddhist monks that have been meditating for years on end. You can have these experiences even without taking any substance of any kind. But, they are an option. They are a shortcut. So if you can't get there, if you've been trying this other way, but once you've gotten there, you now know what it's like. And I think because you know what it's like, you can sort of get into your meditation and think about the thoughts that you were thinking about during the trip, let's say.
Yes.
I think it's important that we have rules, responsibilities that we need to look after ourselves through exercise, meditation, socializing with the right people, like we're doing right now. I mean, we're on a radio or podcast, but me and you, we're just flowing here. We're just being ourselves.
Yeah.
And I don't think people do this enough anymore. I think there's too much small talk in the world, and I think there is a purpose for small talk. We need that as well, but it's almost to the point where people are afraid to become vulnerable by being honest and transparent and open and having these deep conversations. So it can be so healing.
I also think that a lot of people, they feel like it is either arrogant or foolhardy to try and understand what's the biggest picture. Some people now.
Yeah, no, you're good point.
So when they hear people like us speaking about this, they straight away are like, oh, these pompous fucking...
That's true, actually.
These guys, you know, they're trying to talk as if they know the answers to life. But
we don't know.
We are so fascinated with the truth and life and what's going on that it's an obsession not to figure it all out, because I don't think I can, because I am part of it. It's like I can't know how I beat my heart. I just do it. And I don't think I can understand life. But what I can do is get a more and more and more accurate look at what is not going on. And I think there was a book, I can't remember which teaching it was. Maybe it was Taoism.
Okay.
Or Taoism, I should say.
Well, they're known by both, aren't they?
I think so, yeah. It was a list of things that God isn't. So it's like, God isn't this, God isn't this, God isn't this, and so on and so on and so on. And it was always in negatives, because if you ever speak a positive something, then there can be an opposite. So for example, the term non-dual, if you say God is one, or we are all one and part of one reality, that implies that there could be a two, because one can also mean there's a two. That one
can divide it.
But if you say it's non-dual, then you're saying it's not two. But you're not saying it's one, because there's an opposite to one. You're just saying it's not two. And that's how they go through their definitions in the book of what isn't the reality. And they continue on with that. What isn't true. And through figuring out what's not true, you get a better experience of what is true.
It's like you're cancelling out.
Exactly. Yeah. But the more you seek for what is true, the less and the more arrogant you almost
That's a
become.
great point.
Because then you'll go forth and you'll tell people what is true.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Instead of saying, look, that isn't right because of this.
That's a great point. Actually, I made a video on that on YouTube, and I called it "Nothing is True." Yeah, brilliant. I basically went, because I looked at myself and I saw me making all these videos and about philosophy, and I said, wait, hold on a second, Christo. You need to let everyone know that you're not trying to show what the truth is, that you're literally just exploring, because we don't know what the truth is. We really don't know. I mean, the truth is we don't know. I suppose you could say that. But yeah, I mean, the truth is a subjective, I suppose, to a degree, especially when we talk about philosophy and the things we're talking about. Obviously, within science, we could say there obviously is facts, but even things in science sometimes, there'll be a fact that has stood firm for 40 years, and then suddenly somebody disproves it. And
do you know that the speed of light isn't set?
Okay.
So initially they had the speed of light set at a certain speed, and then there was certain experiments for showing up that the speed of light was actually had fluctuated a little bit, and that it does fluctuate very, very slightly. And so they were like, oh, our whole theory of everything is getting messed up by this. And so to fix the problem, what they did is they changed the definition of the speed of light to whatever speed it actually was showing up at the time.
Right.
So they cancel out the problem that the speed of light was actually changing by saying the speed of light is the speed of light.
Okay. And
I'm explaining this really poorly, but a lot of people will say that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light and things like that.
Okay.
But in fact, the speed of light isn't even set itself. It's constantly changing. Whereas most people would say the speed of light is at X speed. It is set. But the scientific facts that we're presented with aren't always fully true.
What is that, though? What is that need within the human condition for there to be a total truth, or for there to be that one thing that can't be changed? Is it like this need for stability? Is it because we're insecure and we need, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think we all want to know, you know.
Yeah, is that must be the mechanism behind dogma then, because essentially people just want to feel more secure in themselves. They want to have a belief.
Yeah.
That makes them feel better or safe, or do you know what I mean? More stable.
I do, and I think this is the some of the places I've been getting to through listening to different spiritual teachers, Adyashanti, touches on it in that book that I played the excerpt from. But the idea through meditation, he doesn't speak about psychedelics at all, but is that through meditation you get to a point where the general chit-chat in your mind doesn't come back. And then you're in a reactive state and always present. So when you're thinking about things and planning things, you're not present. You're thinking about the future or the past. You're not where you are. And when you're living in time, which again is another construct of the human mind, it's little ticks that we've put at intervals and said that this is a reality. But anyway, I could just...
I know.
I could go down so many rabbit holes.
But no, you're
here.
right. I mean, it's essentially to simplify life and to make us feel better. I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it?
According to this man's view, and I would say that I've, again, Gnosticism, I've experienced this somewhat, but it's that when your mind is clear of thoughts, then you have to have, again, this is where the idea of faith comes from, I think. Is that because you're saying, I don't know, and I'm not even going to think in my mind, which, because every single word I use creates a separation, which isn't real. So whenever I'm thinking, I'm deciding to live in this kind of semi-real, not universally real state, which is blocking the experience of reality. Whenever I'm there, I'm not in a place of faith. And what that would mean is that what they're talking about faith-wise isn't this faith in a belief. It's the complete opposite of that. It's going, I don't know what I'm going to do 5 minutes from now. I don't know what I'm going to...
I see what you're saying.
And your faith to be okay.
Yeah.
That everything's okay. I don't need to know.
That's a great point, because if we follow up on that point, then essentially the faith that most of the world sees is that's actually not faith. That's a hope, an insecure hope.
Yeah.
Whereas the actual realization and acceptance of not knowing and not needing to know is faith.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So when someone is saying have faith that everything will be okay, what they're saying is you can't know. You don't know the ultimate reality. Even if meditation leads you to this, you're in this state where you're in the present moment. If you start talking to me and I'm just responding, I don't know where my thoughts are coming from. I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth next. I could start talking about aliens. Why did I think about aliens? I don't know. It's my upbringing. It's my background. It's a million different things brought that word aliens to my mind. But I didn't plan that. That was a spur of the moment way of being and beingness.
And just on the topic of aliens,
Oh God,
1 second.
Aliens,
No, 1 second. Because let's define, the term alien, right? We think of the possibility of these interstellar sentient beings, and we call them alien, right? But what does alien mean?
I don't know, off planet maybe, or.
But I know, but alien means like basically weird or something not unusual, right?
Yeah.
But if we're talking again about enlightenment and the whole singularity and unified force, are they really alien?
No.
If they are there, who are, I don't know. Maybe I am one.
I think we should go back to the beginning and maybe try and pick apart some of the different avenues that this is going down. So let's just start from the name of the show. So it's called Terrifying Enlightenment. So what I find most terrifying about going down this path.
Do you want to tell your story, actually, your original?
Sure, we've got about 8 minutes left. I'll go into it. I'll start from maybe 3-4 years ago. I had been through divorce, and I was searching for answers as to why I had this kind of self-destructive tendency within me. I felt like even before, when the marriage was going well, I always felt like I was going to ruin it. It was something that I had in me from when I was young. It was like I had a fear of
yourself
being in a relationship.
Okay.
I mean, if you're studying psychology, everything is brought back to when you were young. And my brother died in an accident when he was 4 and I was 10, which caused a lot of familial turmoil. And then I feel like something about that and going through that from the ages of 10 to maybe 16, 17 when I started college, it just changed my view of being all the fear and worry and pain of being in a family, basically.
Okay.
Now, I had a lovely family. My parents are amazing and so on and so forth. But that kind of put something in my head that wasn't really balanced, I'll put it that way. And so I was at this point where I had listened to Joe Rogan Experience podcast, and I had heard them speaking about ayahuasca. And because I wasn't religious and I was an atheist at the time, I thought to myself, okay, the way they're speaking of this, it doesn't matter what you believe, you're going to have an experience. And it's going to be profound and it's going to be spiritual. So like, okay, well, I don't really believe in anything. At least, or so I thought. And then I went and I took the ayahuasca. It was a 2-day weekend retreat with 26 people that I didn't know, sitting in a dark room. There was a ceremony part to it. We were all presented with the dark liquid in a dark room. And I swallowed. The first night was the most beautiful experience of my life. I experienced things that are totally incapturable by words, but I was... At one point in time, I was on a beam of light flying around what seemed like an infinite being. When I came back from that, I had the most profound sense of peace and happiness. Now,
that's the good side.
That's the good side, and this is what I'm talking about. What I know now is I was seeing the duality within me. I was seeing the good in me, and then I had to confront the side of me that I didn't want to look at my whole life. I had to look at the shadow, as Jordan Peterson or Carl Jung would talk about. The part of yourself that you deny, the part of yourself that you suppress, the part of yourself that you don't identify with. That when we have our persona, we're like, I'm a good person, I'm intelligent, I'm kind, I'm caring, and so on. Now, there's also the idea of the collective unconscious, which is that because we're all one, our idea of having a separate conscious is just an idea, and that the consciousness that we experience is actually part of the one consciousness of everything, or the consciousness of humanity. So if you take it to that extreme, I was feeling the most amount of pleasure and happiness and love and kindness that a human person can feel, and then the next night I felt the complete opposite. The most amount of terror, fear. I did not know I could be that afraid. That's how afraid I was. I didn't realize I had that amount of terror in me. So I was confronted with what I thought was an external demon, as happens a lot in these kind of experiences. And I felt like it was attacking me, trying to possess me. The typical drug story, you know. This boy on drugs thought he was getting attacked by a demon, you know. It caused a nervous breakdown, PTSD, identity crisis, chronic anxiety. I had to leave my job. I was hearing audio hallucinations afterwards. At one point I was sitting in the cinema with my friends. You know when you're dreaming, you feel like you're falling in your dream? I had that while I was awake watching the movie. I felt like I fell 10 floors while I was sitting in a chair. It terrified me. For the first few weeks after that experience, I had to sleep in a room with friends because I couldn't sleep in my own environment. I was a 30-something-year-old man and I could not sleep by myself. I was absolutely terrified. I thought I had a heart attack. I went to the hospital 3 times to get heart checks. The first time I went in, they thought I had a heart attack too. They told me to contact your next of kin. You've had a heart attack. Well, luckily, when the blood samples came back, they said, no, you're okay. I'm running out of time here, so I got to speed this up.
Oh, God. Okay.
And but then through 3 or 4 years of completely changing my life because of these experiences and analyzing everything that come on from every point of view, trying not to get too crazy, listening to people saying you've lost your soul, you've got possessed and so on. Like I'm like, okay, shut up, go away. And then stumbling across like Alan Watts, Carl Jung, and the psychologists and philosophers that understand these experiences. And what I realized is that I was seeing the two sides of myself, how much duality that I experienced in my day, and how ignorant I was to the big picture, that everything negative is me and everything positive is me, and I need to bring those together and merge them and find balance in between those things. I need to bring love to the darkness and understanding to the darkness. If someone is arguing and fighting on the street, it's because they're scared. They've grown up in a dangerous environment, they've learned coping mechanisms, and now they're just this angry asshole. But they're not an angry asshole. They're you. They're the part of you. You would be that person. If you grew up as them, if you grew up in an abused home, if you grew up having all sorts of problems in your life, you would have developed those coping mechanisms, and you would be the angry person in the street. So you have to develop this understanding and this compassion and this knowing that everything and everyone around you is you. the good part of you, the bad part of you, and you can't just identify with the good. You've got to bring compassion to the other side of you, and then if you can amalgamate the good and the bad and combine them into one unified oneness and actually feel that and experience that, then you have reached nirvana.
Yeah.
So that's my story.
Woo!
Whew. Yeah. I think we kind of jumped all over the place this week, but it was good.
Ladies and gentlemen, so essentially good and bad is just a human perception as well as a human condition. And outside of that, it doesn't exist.
Yes. There's pain and there's suffering.
Mm.
None of us want pain, but suffering is manageable. We don't have to suffer. No one has to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
If we're suffering, it's because we desire something else. If I want money and a car, I'm going to suffer because I don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
If I get it and I'm still unhappy, I'm going to suffer because I desire to be happy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
just a endless spiral
Yes.
of looking for things, trying to attain things when you don't need to attain anything, possibly.
This has been good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
You happy
man.
to come back on next week, maybe?
Yeah, hell yeah.